From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. Week 1 of the Alabama Legislature's 2024 regular session is in the books. The House and Senate met this week for the first, second, and third days of their 30 possible legislative days. And Governor Kay Ivey kicked things off with her State of the State address Tuesday night. She touched on a number of topics: voting rules, gambling, school choice. Her message was that Alabama's government should be productive in contrast to the dysfunction in Washington, D.C.
In more ways than one, we can contrast what we're doing here in Alabama with that of Washington, D.C., or even other states. And I'm confident that because of our work together, Republicans and Democrats alike, Alabama can be the model for the nation. We all recognize the responsibility and role of state government. That means standing up for our Alabama values while focusing on areas like education, economic development, workforce, infrastructure, and public safety.
The very first bill filed in the Senate this year pertains to absentee voting, aiming to crack down on what Republicans call ballot harvesting by increasing penalties for paid efforts to collect ballots en masse. It faces stiff opposition from Democrats who argue that such activity is very rare and that the bill could make it harder for elderly and rural voters to cast ballots. Capitol Journal's Jeff Sanders has that story.
Tensions were high in the Senate Governmental Affairs Committee as lawmakers held a public hearing on Senate Bill 1, aimed at putting an end to ballot harvesting in the state.
This is truly an integrity bill for our elections in the state of Alabama. I believe it's the right thing to do because there are people stealing elections that are out there, and this is, as we know, the last leg of integrity election laws that we need to pass.
Republican Senator Garland Gudger of Coleman is the bill's sponsor. Gudger faced pushback from Democratic lawmakers, worried there is not enough evidence showcasing widespread absentee ballot fraud in the state to justify the bill.
My great aunt,
Democratic committee member Senator Marika Coleman of Birmingham, said she's worried the bill could have unintended consequences.
I go to my great aunt Olivia Bazell's home to help her with her absentee ballot. If she says to me, which would not be uncommon for her to say, "Baby, can I give you $2 for your time or for your gas?" Both of us, according to this piece of legislation, have committed a crime.
A view echoed by a chorus of public speakers at the hearing, including Barbara Manuel with the National Federation of the Blind.
Every individual runs the possibility of being criminalized just performing one of Alabama's hospitalities.
The bill eventually passed out of committee along partisan lines. However, Senator Gudger requested that debate on the full Senate floor be postponed through the weekend to give lawmakers and the public more time to review it. Senate Minority Leader Bobby Singleton says he's hopeful the extension could lead to a compromise.
And those things that has the penalties on it, where you can't pay someone for their ballot, that's illegal anyway. We're fine with that. We don't want to see that anyway, so we're okay with that.
Reporting from the State House, Jeff Sanders for Capitol Journal.
This week, we learned the details of the comprehensive gambling proposal being pushed in the House. There are two bills: House Bill 151, the basic proposed constitutional amendment that, if passed, would go to a vote of the people, and House Bill 152, enabling legislation that contains the details of the far-reaching gambling plan. Here's a quick breakdown of what the proposal would do. The proposal would scrap all of Alabama's existing gambling laws and constitutional amendments, including local bingo amendments. It would institute a state lottery, expand casino gambling, and legalize sports betting. It would set up a commission with a staff structure to regulate the industry, with commissioners appointed by the governor and legislative leaders. 11 casinos would be allowed under the plan, including the current 3 Porch Band of Creek Indian sites. Operators could bid for licenses in Macon, Greene, Mobile, Jefferson, Houston, and Lowndes counties, where of course there are existing gambling operations. There would also be an additional license awarded pending approval of a compact with the Porch Creeks. Casinos would be taxed at 24%, while sports betting would be taxed at 17%. proponents estimate revenue to the state would be between $800 million and $1 billion annually. Where would that money go? Lottery proceeds would all go toward a special fund set aside for education needs. Casino and sports betting revenue would be placed in a trust fund to shore up general fund accounts and then used for expenditures like expanded health care, mental health care, rural health care, state parks, state retiree benefits, drug courts, and other non-recurring expenses. I'll speak with State Representative Chris Blackshear, who is sponsoring this legislation, later in the show. I'll also talk with Brian Hardin of the Alabama Farmers Federation, one of several conservative groups opposing the gambling plan, for that perspective. So you'll want to stay tuned for those interviews. Another big issue this session is school choice, and specifically education savings accounts. If you watched the State of the State address, you heard Governor Kay Ivey say that passing education savings accounts was her top legislative priority. She and top lawmakers have produced Senate Bill 61, which takes a measured, incremental approach to the program. The bill would allow parents to apply a $7,000 tax credit towards tuition at a private school or parochial school. It would also allow $2,000 credits for homeschool parents. But there are restrictions. Any schools participating in the program would need to be accredited, or at least pending accreditation. The schools must participate in a legitimate testing program to track student achievement. And, at least for the first 2 years, only families making less than $90,000 a year would be eligible for the vouchers. The bill was discussed at length this week at the Alabama Daily News Legislative Issues Breakfast. State Representative Danny Garrett, who is the House sponsor, said the bill should appeal to even people with mixed views on school choice. But State Representative Barbara Drummond disagreed, saying the legislature's focus should be on improving existing public schools.
Well, first thing I would like to say, I think that if you are for school choice, and there are a significant number of our constituents are for school choice, you should be happy with this bill, because I believe this bill is better than what most states have done. If you look at the data, it's better than what most states have done. If you are opposed to school choice, I think you should be happy with this bill, because this bill is a fiscally prudent, responsible way to build that school choice model. But when you look at what this will do, it will give opportunity for students who need an alternative. There are a lot of special needs students, for example, that do not have an adequate place to go. The local school does not have the wherewithal, the resources, the network to help them. The first 500 ESAs every year will be going to special needs students. That will give some parents the ability to do that. It's focused for the first couple of years on 300% poverty level, which is going to hit a sweet spot for people who really need some alternatives.
Those folks who are in those rural communities and poor communities who are looking for transportation and health care, and those communities that don't have a choice, they have one school and that is it. And so where will they go? How will they get there? And I am always worried. We talk about giving parents another choice. We have parents out there who are barely making a choice as to where they live and sleep and have a roof over their heads. What happens to those children who are left behind?
It has been a whirlwind week here at the State House, and it's sometimes hard to keep up with the legislature's fast pace. Capitol Journal's Randy Scott catches us up on a busy start to the legislative session.
Newly elected members. The House will come to order.
Welcome to the 2024 regular session. The Alabama House is up and running as lawmakers start organizing legislation they will face over the next few months.
I think everybody is anticipating what's going to happen with the gaming package here in the state of Alabama, what that will look like.
The representatives say they'll monitor the progress of their own proposals, but there are bills which will grab a lot of attention.
The school choice bill, I know my colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle can speak a little bit more about that, but I do have some concerns that any amount of funds that will be pulled from public dollars to fund choice schools or charter schools or what have you, I do have grave concerns about that.
Other measures being introduced include what's being called the False 911 Reporting Bill.
That law will make those false reports, if they rise to a certain level, if they create a certain amount of expense and public alarm, it'll make it a felony, a Class C felony. So that's probably the biggest priority I have, is to get that moving. I think gaming is going to dominate the conversation for the next couple of weeks, but we want to make sure that important law gets moving.
More proposals carry over from the previous session.
I've always been interested in women's issues and educational issues, and this year I'm adding some bills that I think will help our workforce. So I pre-filed something yesterday. I've got just a couple of workforce bills, licensing bills that make it easier to start a job or a career.
Just sworn in new Representative Travis Hendricks is eager to get to work and also has key issues he's ready to address.
Education, most definitely, is a critical component, and also, public safety. Man, I think it doesn't matter where you live, what side of the United States or state of Alabama you live on, everybody wants to feel safe.
In Montgomery, Randy Scott, Capital Journal.
An exciting moment for Montgomery and the state of Alabama today. The Air National Guard's 187th Fighter Wing finally unveiled their long-anticipated F-35 jets. The famed Red Tails Legacy Squadron is one of just 2 Guard units in the country that will house the Air Force's newest fighter jet.
Well, y'all, the wait is over. These F-35s represent more than just advanced military hardware. In Alabama, the presence of these remarkable machines serves as a constant reminder of our state's integral role in defending our nation. These mighty aircrafts, with their sleek designs and thunderous roars, symbolize not only the strength of these United States of America, but also the grit and determination of Alabama.
Today's event is a great day, not just for the 187th, but it's a great day for the River Region and for Montgomery, and it's been 3 or 4 years in the making. So we're just so excited to be able to welcome the F-35, to see it up close, to see the inaugural flight. This has meant so much to the River Region, and it's just been an honor to help marshal this effort through. The 187th is a legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen, the Red Tails, and so I'm just excited to be able to actually see the latest and greatest fighter jet that we have in our arsenal, the F-35, be right here.
That is a special moment, many years in the making, and credit where it is due. Those jets would not be in Alabama if it weren't for the work of former Congresswoman Martha Roby and former Senator Richard Shelby. Coming up next, I'm joined by Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth, who has recently proposed some major changes to the state's workforce development system. We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth. Governor, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, always great to be on, Todd. Appreciate everything you do for Alabama.
Well, we are glad that we're reporting and covering the session. It's great to be back in the mix of things. Session started this week. It's been quite a week getting back into the swing of things. But I wanted to actually back up a few weeks because you made big news coming out a couple of weeks ago with this new report from your Commission on Workforce, the 21st Century Workforce Commission. I don't know what folks were expecting. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but this was a really substantive, thorough report, not just about where we are about workforce, but where we're going. Talk about the origins of that commission and what your big takeaways were from the report.
Yeah, so first, I think the commission's report is going to be a game changer for Alabama. That'll have generational change, and I'm excited about that. As far as, how the commission got started, it's been started several years. We made one change last year where we added private sector support. I think that's so important, not just to have elected officials, but also have people from the private sector on these commissions or people that are experts in the field. And so with this, we just wanted to analyze, how are we doing in workforce development in Alabama, but more so what were changes we could make potentially structurally, what are recommendations we could change, and with the goal to be the workforce engine of the Southeast. And so with that, I'd like to talk about a few of the things that were in the report that I think are important. First is, having a cabinet level position in the governor's office. We think that's so important. And here's why. You've got community colleges out there doing a good job. You've got K through 12, doing a good job. You've got Department of Labor, you've got AIDT, you've got, basically WIOA funds, Commerce, you've got Office of Apprenticeships. We got a lot of different silos in Alabama. You've got the regional workforce councils. We could go on and on naming groups that are involved in workforce. Then you've got private sector groups that do different things. But who is the person in Alabama that understands the entire picture, right? I don't think we really have that person. And so that's why this person will serve at the pleasure of the governor, will advise the governor on, what is, on all the different entities, are they being effective? Are they actually, and effective means they're meeting the demands of industry. And so then we also thought a second part of this is we're gonna have a 9-member kind of advisory board, similar to the Conservation Advisory Board and conservation, right? But we want it to be from industry. And, I want your listeners out there to understand the reason we need it from industry is because that's who does the hiring. And they ultimately should be grading the entities that are training our workers. Are you training them for what we need? And if not, how can we make changes? Or maybe we need to beef up, right? We know a lot of stuff, obviously, with STEM's changing. We know a lot of stuff, changing with cybersecurity. Manufacturing, right, is utilizing a lot of technology. So, is what we're doing in education meeting the demands of industry? Well, who better to do that than an industry board that's going to advise the governor as well as this new cabinet level position? And so, really excited about those structural changes. They're also going to develop, for the first time in our state's history, a overall workforce development plan, right? Now, each different silo I talked about has different plans, but let's have a plan for the entire state where we're going over the next 5 years, the next 10 years. And, we just think that's going to, if you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there, right? And so we think we've got to have a plan there. And then also, I think a huge game changer, and I know you've heard me talk about this before, is our workforce pathway diploma, right? And this conversation started on this from visiting Baldwin Preparatory Academy. This is a public school in Baldwin County that's going to be for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade students. They're going to have 1,200 students in this school. And the goal of this school is to get students directly ready for a job, and that you're not going to go to a 2 or 4 year college. You're going to go right into a job. Their goal is to have 100% job placement there. But they were running into some roadblocks that really go back to the 1990s, where we made some changes where you had to have an additional math and additional science. And if you look at the history in Alabama, our vocational tech schools at the time crashed in the 90s because we said, okay, to graduate high school, you have to have 4 math and sciences instead of 3 math and sciences, which meant you had to spend more time in the classroom and less time actually learning a trade. I've got a construction business. I can tell you this, a plumber can read about, being a plumber. They can study about being a plumber. But guess how they learn about being a plumber?
Doing
exactly. Yeah, and so that's what we want our workforce development, pathways program to have, a diploma where students are doing the activities and learning those. And we think that that's going to really help Alabama lead. And so we're working with our Department of Education. We're working with the feds on that. And we think that's really going to be a game changer in allowing students, to just get trained in what they're going to do. And here's a number that, your listeners need to know out there. 50% of the students in this state end up not getting a 2 or 4 year degree. That's a huge population of students, right? We have about 55,000 high school students a year that graduate. So imagine if we could get 10, 20,000 of these students trained for a job, and then they graduate high school and they go right in to a great job. That's a win for Alabama. And that's just some practical, solutions there that we think are going to really have a big impact in Alabama. It's bipartisan, support from the governor's office, pro tems on board, speakers on board, and so I think we're really going to, get this passed this session, and I'm excited. So.
Yeah, actually, one of your co-chairs of the commission, Gary Smith, the CEO of Power South, was the keynote at our legislative issues breakfast, and he was talking about this. He was saying, you've got education, you've got workforce development, and they have to work together. They have to both be working in concert for economic development, for our economy to move ahead. I thought that was a really good, he talked about this inverted pyramid. It was really interesting to hear him talk about that, because he knows, he's a business leader, an employer, knows exactly what the challenges are out there. So you mentioned the session. Will we see legislation related to these things? Because you're talking about a huge reshuffling of government, a big one. So will we see bills filed?
Oh yeah, there's going to be legislation. We're going to take all these bills up when we come back from spring break, the first week of April. And I expect these to be fast-tracked, get moved, through the process. So I mentioned those. Those will all have legislation. Then we'll also have legislation, and I'm excited about this, child care tax credits.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important when we talk about what are barriers to entry to the workforce. Child care is one of them. Why? Because it's so expensive, right? And families have to weigh the cost of that. And so when we talk about, how do we get people off the sidelines back into the workforce? And I can tell you as a parent, we had twins, and then 21 months later had a daughter. So we had 3 kids that were under 2. That was a challenge, right? And then when we finally did, my wife was a pre-K teacher, and we finally could, do, they went to child care place right there where she taught. It was still expensive, and so being able to help families with that. And so some families look at the cost and they decide, well, it's not worth me working.
Right. Right. Is it worth it to get a job if I'm just going to spend 2/3 of my income, on child care and whatever?
Right. And that's after tax dollars, right, that you got. And so with that, I forget the number of states, but I want to say it's close to 30 other states, offer some type child care tax credit. And so that legislation will be filed. We're also looking at a housing tax credit. We have, let's just talk about Baldwin County, all right, fastest growing county in the state. It's also, we have 8 million tourists that come to Baldwin County every year. When you think about that, right now, they have a huge housing problem with workers there, right? And so they've even had to use condos to house workers. And so this is a Reagan-era program that encourages people to get a job, but the tax credit helps reduce the amount that your rent would cost. There's a place in Gunnersville, it's right behind the Publix there. Normally these, and it's multifamily, right? Most of these apartments would rent for $1,500 a month. Under this program, they rent for $500. So what we're doing, we're getting people, off of government dependence, helping them get a job. But part of what everybody talks about on the benefits cliff, right? Like how do you get, if you're used to benefits, how do you get them off of it? Well, housing's a huge part. And so we're saving them $1,000 a month on housing, just in Gunnersville at this, great program. And again, this isn't my program. This is President Reagan came up with this as a way to incentivize people to get off government dependence, get a job, and start providing for your family. And there's a salary range in there. You can't make over a certain amount to qualify, but you do have to have a job.
Sure.
And so we want to expand that program. We also have a military component to where when our military members are finished with their service, how do we help them transition? And the component on that is going to be scholarships with community colleges. They've got some innovative things they're doing with 4-week classes, 8-week classes, and then also 1- and 2-year degrees. So we want to make sure that we help our military families, which we have a huge population in Alabama, help them transition in the private sector. So that's some of the things that we're working on, and real excited about it because I think it's going to have a huge impact on our state.
Look, yeah, I read your report. Groups come up with reports all the time, commissions, commission for this, commission for that. Yeah. They're not always substantive. They're not always thorough. This was really serious. You had serious people working on it. There are serious recommendations. So I encourage our viewers to really pay attention to this. And it's interesting how workforce has become this watchword, of, really the last couple of years because of the participation rate.
Yeah.
And I think it's smart to pay attention to those barriers. You mentioned transportation, childcare. Healthcare is going to be a big one. coming up, some decisions to make on, you talk about drawing down federal dollars, whether or not that's a possibility. That's a conversation for a different day. I wanted to ask you about school choice.
Sure.
You have been a big proponent of school choice, especially, in particular, education savings accounts coming into this session. We now have a bill. It's pretty interesting. It's not what it was last year. It is a measured sort of incremental approach to this education savings account / voucher issue. What are your thoughts about this initially with this new bill?
Yeah, so I haven't had a chance to read the entire bill, but I want to say this. I want to thank Governor Ivey for her leadership on this. Thank Senator Orr, Representative Garrett, and I am in support of passing legislation this session. And so maybe this bill, I haven't had a chance to read all of it. There might be some amendments. Every bill gets amended in the process. But for the idea, I share Governor Ivey's vision for us to have the strongest school choice legislation in the country, and I'm going to use all the power in my office to make sure that happens. And it'll help people. I've seen it, and I want your listeners to understand it's not just a private school deal, right? It's also public schools and charter schools, right? When you talk about school choice, it's really school choice, right? And ESAs allow parents to decide what's the best option for their family. And with that, I was in Washington, D.C. a few months ago. I'm part of what's called a Hunt King Fellows, and it's a bipartisan group of just lieutenant governors, senators, House members from across the country, and got a chance to tour in Washington, D.C., a charter school. And what was interesting, they've totally flipped Washington, D.C., where they have 48% charter schools, public charter schools,
right,
52% traditional. And here's what's happened. Because the charter schools have come in on some traditional schools that got shut down, it's raised the competition to where everybody is performing higher, and that's what school choice does. You have competition, which is good. I'm competitive. I want to win. If somebody's challenging me, I'm going to have to up my game. That's what's going on. And if Washington, D.C. can fix their school systems to where people are moving back in, we can do the same thing in Alabama.
Yeah. Which is really that was the original point of school choice. That was the original point of charter schools, was not to compete with public education, but to offer competition to raise everybody, to lift all boats, raise the tide. So it's been a long time since I've heard somebody actually remember that and say that. So that's well received. And so we'll see this bill go through the process. And speaking of that, school choice, gambling, absentee ballots, property taxes. There's some big issues up this session. You're going to have some debates in the Senate that might be filibustered, long debates perhaps. You've got to be there as chair, right, to manage that debate, to make rulings. Talk about the challenge that might be ahead of you for, maybe some pretty testy debates.
Yeah, so my job's to, not get engaged in the policy side when I'm presiding over the Senate. My job is to understand the rules of the Senate, to understand, all the different, procedures that go on and do it correct. And so that's what we do, right? We call balls and strikes there, and we're going to do it, by exactly, how the rules say, and that's what we do. And so with that, certainly I'll have opinions on things, but I don't let that get involved in how I preside over the Senate.
As the chair, yeah.
I'm sure I'll be sitting there a lot. You'll see me with my Diet Mountain Dew, and as filibustering's going on, I'm sure I'll, be up walking around some, getting somebody to sub. But that's just part of it, and. This is the process. I do think the Senate's going to take up some controversial things in the first 2 weeks. And I think there's some stuff. Look, ballot harvesting, we don't need people, going out, harvesting ballots from people. That's not, if you want to vote, you should go vote yourself, right? And we don't need people going out collecting hundreds of ballots and taking them in. That's not how the process should work. So, I support that legislation. I don't think it should be controversial. Because, but I'm sure it will be. But I think, certainly my understanding is first few weeks in the Senate, there could be some fireworks.
Well, we will be watching and we'll be covering. Thank you for your time today, and look forward to seeing you around the State House as we go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Todd.
We'll be right back.
Rosa Parks is one of the most enduring symbols of the American Civil Rights era of the mid-20th century. She was active in the Montgomery chapter of the NAACP, serving as its field secretary. Although she was not the first Black woman in Montgomery to be arrested for doing so, Her 1955 arrest for violating the segregation ordinance by refusing to give up her bus seat to a white man triggered a 382-day boycott of Montgomery City buses and prompted a challenge of the ordinance's constitutionality in federal court. In December 1956, after the U.S. Supreme Court affirmed a district court ruling against segregation, Parks took a symbolic victory ride near the front of a city bus. Parks continued to work for civil rights causes throughout her life and was awarded the nation's highest honors for her role in the movement.
You're watching Alabama Public Television.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. One big issue facing the legislature this year is gambling. And joining me next to talk about it is the sponsor of the comprehensive gambling bill, Representative Chris Blackshear, Phoenix City. Representative, thanks for coming on the show.
Todd, thanks for having me on the show. It's good to see you.
Absolutely. Well, like I said, once again, gambling is a big key issue in the legislative session. Interesting because last year kind of took the year off, right? No bills introduced. But we knew that this year was coming because you, your colleague Andy Witt, some others had been kind of tasked by the Speaker with researching, going out and doing some research and seeing what bills y'all might want to come up with. Now you have filed legislation, two pieces of legislation, a constitutional amendment that would go to the voters if passed, but also enabling legislation, which is the details of exactly what the policy is. You've now filed it, so walk us through exactly what this plan would do.
Well, Todd, thanks for the opportunity to come on because it is a big topic. And when we went through this process over the last 12 months that Speaker Ledbetter tasked us with, we knew it wasn't an easy task, and we knew at the end of it, whatever the piece of legislation looked like when we introduced it, there was not going to be a perfect piece of legislation because it's just not a perfect topic. A lot of people don't want to talk about.
Sure.
But we think we have the best possible piece of legislation to deal with the problems that we have in the state of Alabama. So the CA, which is HB 151 that we filed earlier today, will actually, the best way to describe it is, the CA is what the people will actually vote on. And I think that's key with all of this. We can sit here with all the enabling and all the framework, but as you know, Todd, the legislature does not have the authority to expand gambling or authorize gambling in the state. That's only by a vote of the people. Mm-hmm. So that's the key thing here. This is an opportunity to let the people vote, which they haven't done on since 1999, 25 years this year. Mm. So the enabling legislation, where it starts off at, I guess the best way to sum it up is we're imploding what is in place today. Back in the 80s, the racetrack was passed where you had the 4 tracks, which was Mobile, Macon, Greene, and Jefferson counties that created the dog tracks back in the 80s. And then ever since then, over the last 40 plus years, we've introduced 18 different CAs that were ultimately passed through the House and the Senate that the local constituents in those counties ratified, saying we want to allow gaming in those particular counties.
Bingo, right?
Bingo, electronic bingo, historical horse racing is in all of that as well too, which could be pari-mutuel.
And bingo kind of got stretched, the meaning of that kind of got stretched.
Yeah, and that's exactly one of the problems is you could probably ask 100 people and get 99 different definitions of what is legal gaming in the state of Alabama. And let's be clear, there's gambling in Alabama today.
Sure.
And it exists on your phones, it exists in the back of your gas stations, your grocery stores. Heck, we've walked in clothing stores and seen them, and it's not just in the counties that have the 18 CAs. So our CA that's in place that we have introduced completely abolishes all the local 18 CAs. It also completely abolishes the entire section of the Alabama Constitution of 2022, which is Section 65, completely overhauls that and replaces it where we're saying, okay, the only forms of gaming allowed in Alabama are 5 things. 1, casinos. 2, an education lottery. 3, mobile sports betting or sports betting in general. 4, your raffles, like your high school drawdowns and things like that. And finally, the 5th, traditional bingo played on cardboard or paper. We're saying that is it. That will all that will be allowed. Then we're standing up, another piece of it, we're standing up the Gaming Commission. It will be a 9-person panel appointed 4 by the governor, one by the Lieutenant Governor, 2 by the Speaker of the House, 2 by the Senate Pro Tem, President Pro Tem of the Senate. One each of those must be a minority appointment to the board. Also, it will establish the state education lottery. And we'll have a 7-person lottery corporation that will oversee the lottery. Those will be appointed by the governor, and it dotted lines and rolls up to the Gaming Commission. The Gaming Commission will then hire their executive director. The executive director will then hire their enforcement officer, and we're creating a brand new enforcement division specifically focused on gambling in the state of Alabama. It won't be under ALEA, it won't be under the AG's office, it will be under the board. It would be under the Gaming Commission, funded by all the proceeds from gaming in the state of Alabama. And then finally, it also increases all the penalties. Penalties and fines. Almost 90% of them that are misdemeanors now will be felonies going forward, and we step those felonies up for first offense, second offense, and so forth. It would not only increase the level of the felony, but also the fine, monetary fine that goes along with that.
So by offenses, do you mean an illegal operation out there? Because I've always heard that was part of the problem, is you've got to get the owner of someone who's operating an illegal gambling hall or what have you, and be able to put them in jail, real teeth on the law. Is that what you mean by offenses?
Here's an example I've given. I'm tongue-in-cheek when I give you this example because I don't condone any of it. But I say, if you ever want to be a criminal in the state, don't traffic drugs, open an illegal gaming facility, because it's all misdemeanors. You can pay a $1,000 fine, 24 hours, you're back out. 30 days, you can be up and running again. Wow. And it's opened it up for interpretations. The Enforcement Division has full authority to go in, and they don't see local crimes. It is specifically those casinos, the sports betting sites on your phone, the sports books at the casinos. They have nothing else to do in the jurisdictions of the counties or the municipalities where the casinos will be licensed. So they would be there to go in and almost be additional boots on the ground, so you won't be dependent upon your local sheriffs. Now, you'll need their assistance and things, but the audits, the investigations, and all of that will be hired. We'll have auditors, we'll have investigators, and all the other necessary full-time employees underneath the Gaming Commission.
Interesting. When I talk to lawmakers about the issue of gambling, they have questions about the different sort of factors. One big one is revenue. So let me ask you, how much revenue are you projecting from this, and where would it go? I know that was a big deal back in 2021.
Yeah, and it's all, and Todd, it's, again, you can ask 5 different people and get 5 different answers, but we're looking anywhere from $800 million to $1 billion annually. Now that's all in. That's from, that would require, one thing I did leave off of the CA would be the governor to negotiate a compact with PCI in the state. So I want to make sure I didn't leave that out. That's a big one. Yeah. And I thought about that when you said the revenue. So all the revenue would be what you would get from a compact with PCI, your sports betting revenue, your casinos revenue, and your lottery revenue. So when we get it in the past we've had issues before because we would always try to earmark the dollars.
Right.
And 3 years ago we had 3,000 requests for 200 pieces of the pie. It's just mathematically not going to work.
This much to education, this much to mental health, this much to, okay.
And when you open that up, then when you did it here, what about here? So in this legislation, we're creating 2 buckets. When I say buckets, we're going to have the Gaming Trust Fund and the Lottery Trust Fund. The Lottery Trust Fund will be under the ETF. All proceeds of the lottery will go to this education supplemental. We have a prerequisite in there that no money can be used from the education lottery proceeds to fund prisons or build new prisons. So that's a little clause we put in there. Also, the lottery will pay, first off the top, all of its expenses to run the lottery, then that money goes in there. And the way we're going to distribute it is to one-time, non-reoccurring items. Now, we listed a few things in there that we want to see to include but not limited to. One of which, school resource officers. We know that's been a lack across the state in funding for that. Fortifying security of schools, whether it's better doors, better windows, is whatever the realm of security. And the biggest thing is the last dollar scholarship for our 2-year junior colleges and our technical schools. So if you've exhausted all other resources out there to get aid, and I'm not talking about student loans, I'm talking any type of aid you have, you have the opportunity to apply and get the last dollar scholarship. And we think that ties right into the workforce development program we're rolling out now, to where we give kids an opportunity that may not want to go to a 4-year. They want to be that welder. They want to be that electrician. This gives them the path to do it, and they won't be heavy in debt when they go through that. And it may help, our workforce here right back in the state.
What about the other pot?
So the other part of it, everything else, sports betting, casinos, and all that, goes into a second called the Gaming Trust Fund, which will fall under the general fund. It will also be a supplemental appropriation annually. Underneath that, some of the items we put out there is potential raises for your teacher, one-time bonuses for your teachers, your state retirees, volunteer fire departments, roads and bridges projects in our counties, rural health care, ambulatory care, telemed, things like that to look at in there. But off the top of it, again, you'll pay your expenses for the Gaming Commission out of that and on those. But the first thing we're going to do, and you remember, Todd, a couple years ago we set up that trust fund, the savings account basically for the general fund. Right now the balance is about $150 million. Well, the first thing we're going to do is get that balance up to $300 million, because we know this interest rates, when they drop, your general fund numbers are going to drop. So we need to be prepared for that. We should easily get that extra $150 million from the license that would be required to come in for the casinos that we would have out there. But that would be the first thing. And then every year, non-reoccurring supplemental appropriation. So it gives us the flexibility. The only thing that's earmarked, any of the dollars, is 10% of the specific sports betting proceeds will go back and be equally split between our 67 sheriffs. Remember a couple years ago we had the permitless carry bid that took money out. This won't 100% replace it, but in our opinion, sports betting's only going to grow. This gives us a mechanism and a relief valve that we can have in place to start replenishing some of those funds back to our local sheriffs.
Well, a lot of that I can see sounding very appealing to your lawmakers. You've obviously thought about this a lot. It's a well thought out sort of proposal. But let me ask you, you've got plenty of folks out there that, understanding that plenty of this is existing right now, but that are opposed to expanding gambling. They point to things like the social ills, the addiction that happens, especially on the sports betting side. There's some new research out there about that. So how do you respond to those arguments, especially from conservatives, who say, look, we just don't want anything that expands gambling in our state. Let's just go and enforce the law, not expand it. How do you respond to that?
I guess my first question would be those individuals, a couple parts. One would be, what's legal and what's not? I think that's part of the problem. We have sheriffs in the state that have different rulings, and we've seen different Supreme Court rulings. We've seen different AG opinions it's caused confusion. I mean, we see it all the time across the state. But when it comes to the expansion, we've gone, what was so special about this bill, I think, Ty, we went ourselves, boots on the ground. We walked in these facilities that are the big ones that most people know when they think about gaming in the state. But we went in the nutrition store where you can get you a little smoothie, but you can also pull the one-arm bandit if you wanted to. We went in a clothing store that was in a county in the north part of the state that does not have a local CA, and the changing room was a room with 10 slot machines in it. So we actually seen on the ground. So when we see these, we know how many are out there. So if I'm going to 7 licensed casinos, and again, the Porch Creek counts, if you only had 10, you, from a casino perspective, going from several hundred to a total of 10, and then we're going to have an enforcement division that enforces those, regulates them. Oh yeah, and then we also increase all the penalties. We put some teeth into the law. That's, to me, is drastically reducing. That's not expanding. Now, let me flip and pivot to the other side of the coin for sports betting on your phone. We're very naive and we're fooling ourselves if we don't think that's happening today. There's folks out there that gamble every single day on an app on their phone, whether it's through a bookie in the state or whether it's through having an offshore account. It's happening every single day. In fact, last year there was 1.93 million attempts to make an illegal sports bet in the state of Alabama last year on phones. So it's happening. But that is also going to be regulated. It comes in. I'll ask you, can I use you as an example?
Sure.
You do online banking?
Yeah.
Okay. The same security mechanisms and encryption codes that are behind there, and age validations and individual validations are the same ones that these online sports betting apps use as their algorithms and security protection behind the scenes.
I see.
So if you feel comfortable doing online banking, you should feel comfortable if you so choose to do sports betting. And another thing out there that I've seen in the media about it being on every single smartphone, this is not a iOS update the next time you update your Apple phone. You have to voluntarily go out there and download this app and play if you want to. And there are specific minimum, max number of bets you can make per day, dollar values per day, per week, per month. So they have stop gaps in there. And the third prong I would say to the question you asked me is about the addictions that you see. I mean, I think we've seen some reports in the last couple of weeks about the addictions, the bankruptcy rate, potentially divorce rates in homes and stuff like that. I would question the people that came out with those numbers. Are those based upon current number of gaming establishments and current number of illegal attempts, current number of illegal sports bets that are being made now, or based upon us reducing it by over 90% and then regulating it and controlling it? Should those numbers reduce?
Well, that's why I wanted to ask you the question. We're out of time. We're going to talk about this a lot more. So something tells me we're going to really be talking about this a lot this session, but I appreciate you coming on, giving us sort of the brass tacks about what the bill does and answering some questions about it. Thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you, Todd.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. We've now heard from proponents of the sweeping gambling legislation being considered by the legislature. Now for a different perspective, Brian Hardin, Director of External Affairs for the Alabama Farmers Federation. Brian, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Todd. Great to be with you.
Well, let's talk about it. Like I said, we just heard from Chris Blackshear, the sponsor of the sweeping gambling legislation. The Farmers Federation is one of several groups, several conservative groups, that are opposed to expanding gambling and letting that voice be heard. So walk me through it. What is the opposition saying? What is your message to lawmakers as this bill starts going?
So to back up a little bit, we've had a long-standing policy position opposing gambling. And really, Todd, that is values-based. I mean, if you go back, through the history of our organization, it's just been something that is important to a majority of our membership to oppose for a lot of reasons. But I would really focus on it's not a good way to fund government, and it's not generally good for the state of Alabama. When you talk about the impacts that gambling can have negatively on families, on communities, on individuals, we don't want to support that. We feel like that is not something that the state should support at the expense of its citizens.
Mm-hmm. When I talk to opponents, I sometimes hear this message that we've struggled with gambling laws for decades, really, and especially with casinos. They'll get shut down, they'll pop back up, they'll get shut down multiple times. And what I hear from some opponents is, legalizing this would essentially be rewarding law breaking. Is that something that comes up in your conversations?
It does, and I think enforcement is all about what is the commitment of our state government to enforcement. We have laws on the books. The Supreme Court has ruled very clearly of what's legal and illegal. So there's really no gray area on what is legal in the state in regards to gambling. But what we need is a commitment to enforcement. I think the legislature can do that, obviously, without expanding gambling. To say that we need to expand gambling or legalize more gambling to address the enforcement does not make sense. We can certainly support, as the Farmers Federation, more enforcement and stricter enforcement of illegal gambling, but let's don't use that as an excuse to expand gambling and hurt even more people.
Yeah, somebody compared it to the immigration situation, like, amnesty or legal, pass the citizenship. Well, no, you got to stop the border first. Maybe enforcement comes first. Well, another thing I hear from opponents is the social ills, and especially when it comes to things like casinos, sports betting, the addictive nature. There's been some reports out lately about, especially on the sports betting side, the addictive nature of that and what it could lead to long term. What are you hearing about that? Is that resonating also with the opposition?
It is, and I think we're learning more about that, obviously, both as an organization and as society. Just recently, this past Sunday, 60 Minutes did a deep dive story about that particular issue. So it's not just something that we're facing in Alabama, it's something that we're facing nationwide. And if you look at some of the other states who have legalized sports betting, they do see an uptick in gambling addiction. They are saying in effect in a lot of places, hey, we need to tap the brakes and reevaluate this. This is a growing crisis, especially among young adult males. I've got a teenage son, and so I'm concerned about him. We all have sons and brothers and nephews and grandsons, and so that young adult male demographic is especially vulnerable. We love our sports in Alabama. You've got fantasy sports, but making this easier to access on our phones anytime, anywhere, for any age is a real concern. A couple of weeks ago, I was pulling up a ball game on my ESPN app, and before I could even go to the feed of the ball game, what was the first thing that I saw? It was, hey, do you want to bet on this game?
Want to bet?
Yeah. So if I'd gone further, maybe there's the parameters to stop that if it's in Alabama. If not, well, then that's the first thing we need to talk about is how are we enforcing that. But the story that it tells me is that how vulnerable and how open it is, and that could have been, my 14-year-old son. It could have been a 25-year-old young man. It could have been an 18-year-old college student. So I don't think as a society generally we've really stopped and thought a lot about those issues, and I think this is an opportunity to really dig in. This is not just about Alabama getting a lottery. This is much, much bigger than a lottery.
But to that point, I mean, and this Mr. Blackshear brought this up, a lot of that's happening already, right? The sports betting, a lot of it can happen offshore or whatever. You can, if you want to, you can really bet on sports. Same thing with casinos. It's here already, and the state may not be tapping into that tax base. So don't they have an argument that, hey, this stuff is here already, let's regulate it, let's tax it, let's get something out of it?
I would go back to say, if it's illegal, let's enforce the law. With everything that we say, well, we could get taxes, we could get more money for the state, there's also a cost to that. So whatever we make off the backs of somebody that is, dealing with gambling, whether it's an addiction or even something that's just destructive, again, to our society and families as a whole, the state should not be profiting or making money and funding government based off of something like that. We have an opportunity in Alabama right now to say, for example, on sports betting, let's stop it in its tracks. Yes, a lot of states are passing that around the country. It's big bucks. But I think the trade that we would make as a state, we would look back one day and regret that we did that.
Well, I know it's early in the session, but we expect this legislation to move pretty quickly in the House, or at least, pass or fail, they want to address it. So talk to me about how your conversations are going. I know it's early, but in the House, in the Senate, when you sit down with lawmakers, when the Farmers Federation and other conservative groups, Policy Institute is another one, ALCAP is another one that is opposed to this bill. How are those conversations going? When you make these arguments to lawmakers, what is their response?
I think a lot of those resonate with them. I would also say, again, just like I think generally we're not thinking a lot about the challenges of legalizing sports betting. They are not thinking about that in many cases too.
Are they kind of more focused on the lottery?
I think lottery is, that's always the buzzword. That's kind of the catch, and that's what people may hear at first. But when you talk about expanding the number of casinos, when you talk about expanding what can be played in casinos, and then you add the sports betting component, that is something we're just really asking them to take a look at. Todd, you can Google gambling addiction. You can check out podcasts. It is unreal, the warning signs that we have. If as a state we would heed those and say, hey, what can we do to hold the line on that, to be proactive on that? The other thing, of course, that comes up with lawmakers sometimes is, well, I just want to let my constituents vote.
Yeah.
Understand, that commentary. However, what we say to them is that if you have legislation before you that is extremely problematic with the issues that has been introduced, then you should not let that go forward to the people. That should be something that is a stopgap as an elected representative or elected senator That's your job to evaluate that. You're going to have the opportunity more than a constituent to sit down and read a 140-plus page bill that has all all these details and how comprehensive it is. So it is incumbent on our elected officials to really evaluate and share that with their constituents. And that is a tough job, but that's what we need is for them to really look at that and make sure the constituents understand the real dangers that are out there.
I'm glad you put it that way because it is a two-way street. A lot of folks kind of misunderstand it sometimes, that it says, hey, you're just there to vote how I ask you to, because you can't take a poll of your district every time an issue comes up. It's a two-way street. You got to listen to your constituents. You also have access to more information and sometimes have to educate your constituents on things. And so this is an important issue that, like you said, 190-page bill?
I think it's 140 plus pages, and of course you have the constitutional amendment, which is a separate bill of about 9 pages. So a lot of information and a lot to digest and decipher and figure out, okay, what are the intended consequences, but also, like with any legislation, a lot of unintended consequences and a lot of open-ended questions.
Yeah. Well, we're certainly going to be following this going forward. I really appreciate you coming on because we want to have both perspectives. There are lots of proponents, lots of opponents, and I want to make sure our viewers really understand both. So, Brian, thank you. Thank Mr. Parnell, and we'll be following this legislation going forward.
Thank you, Todd.
We'll be right back.
Originally designated as a postal route in 1806, the old federal road stretched through the Creek Indian Territory of Lower Alabama. Alabama's federal road functioned as a major thoroughfare for western migration into the Old Southwest, ushering in a new era of national expansion and exploitation of Native American territory. Although much of the federal road has disappeared, portions of it remain today.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week, starting Monday at 10:30 p.m. with more Capitol Journal from here at the State House. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.